what? Thanks for being here today. We really appreciate it. Dr. Susan Kane-Ronning, you're a licensed psychologist,
Mm-hmm.
Bellingham, Washington, right?
Uh-huh.
Specialty in child behavior disorders, 30 years of experience specializing in family trauma and therapy. And the other thing here too, you've conducted hundreds of evaluations with children, many of whom engage in cruelty towards animals and people,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Your op-ed, was it which paper was it? The Casper,
Ask Tribune.
yeah, Tribune. You said the majority of adults who commit violent crimes have a history of animal cruelty in childhood. Up to 70% of the most serious and violent offenders in prison have repeated and severe episodes of animal abuse in their family, which to me sounds like it's a cyclical thing. It's been passed down.
Well, I think what we need to remember is that kids aren't born to be cruel to animals. There may be a small amount of genetic loading, but the most kids are, they're born with a temperament. Temperament is 50% genetic, 50% environmental, easily malleable. And then we have what's called epigenetics, which is those things that this is the genes, and this is what turns them on and off. So humans, the way we parent can nurture and change bad genetics. But what you need to remember is that neurons that fire together wire together. So if we create a scenario that helps nurture animal cruelty, kids will arrange their neurons around animal cruelty. And there's several different things. If they witness abuse, males who are more likely to be physically punished, and if they're physically punished, are more likely to engage in animal abuse.
Mhm.
And sexual murders, animal cruelty co-occurs with children who've been sexually assaulted.
One more
So
time. One more time.
animal cruelty co-occurs with children who have been sexually assaulted or victimized.
Those have been your findings, or
That's the research.
that's the research?
That's the research. Everything I'm telling you right now is the research. I'm just
Mhm.
quoting it. And 43% of school shooters committed earlier acts of animal cruelty. So one of the things I've done in the last 30 some years since school shootings have become an issue is I do lethality risk evaluations for school districts. So kids make gestures or threats, and I evaluate them and decide psychologically what their lethality risk is. And many of those kids, certainly not all of them, but some of those kids who are most at risk will have a history of animal cruelty.
Now, I missed this, but you did speak at the Game and Fish Commission meeting. Is that right?
Yes, I spoke at the Wyoming Fish and Game Commission.
Right. Okay. And when you spoke, what do you think was the most widely received and the most widely not received, if you could tell, research that you provided?
Well, I wouldn't have been able to tell because, we weren't allowed to. I did it via the webinar. And
Uh,
I need to point out that the webinar capped at 500 people. And in order for me to get into the webinar, I had to have another person come out of the webinar. So I coordinated with another individual who had to leave. She clicked out and I clicked in, and that's how I even got in at all. And so I wasn't able to see the responses. I mean, I couldn't see the people's faces in the group.
let me re-ask, then what is the most, if you can, um, what is the most important thing, notion, research that you believe, that you hoped, that you got across to the people listening to you?
Um, I reference the research about people who commit these acts, but the piece that I really talked about is that for Cody Roberts, this isn't a one-off. You know, we can't look at this and say, you know, I'm not diagnosing him. That would be unethical. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm making any kind of mental health diagnosis. But for us to assume that at 42, a person decides one time to become cruel to animals, I don't believe that. This isn't a one-off for Cody Roberts. And in the state, it's a legally sanctioned action. In Wyoming and Idaho, and I think maybe Montana, but I can't remember. I'd have to look at that specifically.
Mhm.
But it is legally sanctioned to kill wolves and coyotes in a
Yes.
variety of heinous ways. However, what they referred to, what I heard in that meeting over and over from people who spoke, was that this practice of whacking, running wolves and coyotes over with snowmobiles and ATVs is absolutely legal and sanctioned in the state.
And very prevalent.
It's not only prevalent, these people spoke about the fact that it's a weekend pastime. The families do it. They go out, they get together, the whole family, they get on their ATVs or their snowmobiles, they look for a coyote or a wolf, and they run it to exhaustion and they run it over.
Mhm.
Multiple times. They videotape themselves.
Right.
And what I got from the people who spoke is they're absolutely disgusted by this practice in their state and they want it to stop. The state, I think people tried to get it banned 2 years ago and the legislature wouldn't.
They wanted it to stop. So is this, and and I should have said that you're a big time animal advocate. You work with the Sierra Club, correct?
I am the co-chair of the Washington Sierra Club Wildlife Committee, and the Washington Sierra Club has been working hand in hand with the Wyoming Sierra Club, supporting them in this endeavor to stop these behaviors and to address what happened with Cody Roberts. So we thoroughly support the Wyoming Sierra Club. And then on top of that, I live in a county, Whatcom County, and so I'm on the Whatcom County Wildlife Advisory Committee, and I'm also part of a group called the Washington Wildlife First, which
Mhm.
is a coalition of many conservation groups that are working to reform our own Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife.
And you had pointed out, and I had actually pointed out this in a video as well. When I read, there was an op-ed. Was that an op-ed? Albert Summers of Pinedale, right?
Right.
We're talking about the one-offs, not a one-off. Albert Summers of Pinedale, who's the Wyoming Speaker of the House. Wyoming Speaker of the House. Hey, he knows Cody Roberts. He's a decent guy. I say decent because we're hearing all this worldwide outcry of hate and animosity from some. And then we have the Wyoming Speaker of the House saying he's a decent guy. Um, uh, when you hear about the Cody Roberts torturing and unaliving, I don't necessarily, and I think many people don't necessarily think decent. So that's the one-off thing you were talking about earlier.
Well, decent guys don't torture animals. And if we have a culture that thinks that's decent, then we need to evaluate that multi-generational systemic culture that's supporting that behavior, which Wyoming has. And they don't want to look at that. When I was at that meeting, that Fish and Game meeting, the director of Fish and Game stood up at the end and said, "This is not Wyoming." And I thought that is the most disingenuous thing someone can say. Of course it's Wyoming. You've sanctioned it, you've made it legal. You don't even have a wildlife cruelty bill or legislation or a law. The only thing the Fish and Game Department could get Cody Roberts on was possessing a wild animal. And because of such pressure, the Sublette County is being pushed to press animal cruelty charges towards him. Um, and hopefully that will happen. That will continue to be an issue if we make it an issue for Sublette County, right?
Mhm.
Um, but this speaks towards generational, multi-generational tolerance of abuse. The view that wolves and coyotes are vermin, they're nuisances. They don't have a place on the landscape, and they certainly don't have a place in biodiversity. And
Mhm.
there was a letter to the editor written by somebody, I think it was also in the Tribune, the
Mhm.
paper where the Casper Tribune, the paper that published my op-ed. And this person said that he knows Roberts. He grew up in the same county. He may have been related or not. I couldn't remember. But one of the things he said is that his ancestors, his grandparents, exterminated the wolves in that area.
Who said this?
This was a letter to the editor that was in I think it was in the Tribune, the Casper Tribune. So
Exterminated.
that speaks, yes, eradicated them in that area. That's a proud moment to brag about. And that speaks towards the level of disgust these people have about an amazing carnivore. If you speak about wolves, they are conscious, sentient beings. They have a pack of a family. This wolf, this female wolf that was young, that was ran down to exhaustion and then ran over by a snowmobile, she was part of a family that's going to grieve and miss her. She was an important piece of that family. And we treat these animals, they're in many ways more socially conscious than humans because they treat their people, their packs, with respect.
Mhm.
And we don't necessarily do that.
No,
Learn from them.
and we too, the thing is too, and we're almost the opposite way around. And I know in that meeting that you were a part of, there was a gentleman who got up who was a hunter, and you may remember this. He's a hunter. He was very disgusted about Cody Roberts' actions, and he said, when I grew up, my father, I was there, my son, my grandfather, the father, everyone was sitting around the table, and they never talked about this sport, if you will, of hunting in such a way in which Cody Roberts took it to that level with the torturing. That this is something that it's blemishing, if you will, the hunters out there who are doing this the legal way. What are your
So,
thoughts on
well, let's talk about that a little bit. There's a recent article in Outdoor Life that I just read this morning,
that?
and there's several different facets of this. The first thing that the hunters are concerned about is that the anti-hunting groups are coming after them and coming after Wyoming and the federal government for better legislation. The federal government caused this. They delisted the wolf. Research shows that when you relax or lessen the laws, you have greater poaching and greater wolf disappearances. This was predicted, and the federal government should have seen that, right? And despite lawsuits, they have continued to keep them delisted in the Rocky Mountain area. And what people forget is that's Wyoming, Idaho, Montana. It's 1/3 of Washington, the state that I'm in. 1/3
Mhm.
of our wolves in our state is federally delisted. They're just still protected within our state. And there is now a movement in our own state to change them, downlist them, double downlist them from endangered down to sensitive, skip threatened and down to sensitive. But if I want to get back to the issue of the hunting piece, the
Mhm.
it's it doesn't need to be polarized. The Sierra Club's not anti-hunting. Most conservation groups are not anti-hunting. They support ethical hunting. But killing wolves is not subsistence hunting. It's trophy hunting. It's killing for the sake and the pleasure of killing. So if wolves or if hunters are appalled by this, then are they willing to stand up and change the legislation that stops it? Or are they only going to call out Cody Roberts because he brought it to attention? This is a practice that's legal. Are they going to stand up and say, no, we want it to stop? Or are they going to say, we're afraid that this is going to cause problems? Well, it is causing problems. I
Mhm.
think you're going to see conservation groups are going to continue to push this until something changes.
Do you think a lot of hunters are now standing up and saying, hey, this guy is not us. Don't treat
Absolutely.
us like him. But at the same time, they've got they've got the 85% predator zone. So they can do
Absolutely.
anything that they want to essentially in that predator zone.
And here's the deal is we are appalled by somebody running over, chasing coyote or wolf to exhaustion and running over them, but they're choked, in snares, they're trapped. In Wyoming, there is no unlegal way to kill a wolf.
Mm.
And is that being sanctioned and okay by hunters? Because what's happened is this has been going on for a while. The public just found out through Cody Roberts.
So then I want to bring that up for a moment. Cody Roberts could be a pivotal moment. This whole thing with Cody Roberts could be a pivotal moment for the state of Wyoming, for deers, the federal government. Things could change if people want the change. Cody Roberts brought this, it got into the news cycle. Usually I would think it would get, go right under, under the carpet. But Cody Roberts brought this out, and this could be, I don't know if you agree, this could be a pivotal moment in history.
I hope it is. I hope that it's the rallying cry of every American who deplores torture and cruelty of wildlife and animals. I think it's our hill to die on in terms of saying we've had enough. We don't want any of this to continue. And it took this, I think, to bring it out into the open and for people to be absolutely appalled by it.
What are your thoughts so again, they didn't want to get it in the news because, that February 29th was the evening of the torturing and the kill and the unaliving. And then I had done a story yesterday where Cody C. Roberts Trucking LLC, his business, had worked with the state twice with the Department of Transportation, twice with Fish and Game since that incident. And to me, that just says, okay, we're just going along, we're going with the flow. The governor didn't even name Cody Roberts by name on April 8th in his tweets or X on Twitter. To me, that just says, the governor said, oh, he did this. We don't accept that. That is not the way to treat animals. But at the same time, my words, we don't want people, his words, we don't want people to use a broad brush to say, this is Wyoming. This is Wyoming. There was no plan of action.
No, well, there still isn't. They're hoping people will be quiet. There is no plan of action. They want to go back to a good old boy system where it's system as usual, no change in the laws, nobody cares. The article I read earlier in Outdoor Life, they talked about the fact that people are boycotting Wyoming tourism. They're saying they won't go there. I won't go there, and I won't go to Idaho, and Idaho is my neighboring state.
Hey, you know what I put in? I put in messages, I've got that verification thing on Instagram because I used to do TV news. And I put in messages to T-Pain and Ludacris last night because they're having that big, that summer festival there. I forget what the days, it's something days, Cheyenne days or something like that. And yeah, I think that is the number one employer for the state. The number one. So, hit him. Someone said, hit him where it hurts.
$4.5 billion in 2023 for tourism. They are the fourth largest tourism revenue in the country. So if people want to hit them, they say, change your behavior. We're not coming. That's something we have a choice about. Several conservation groups, I think Sierra Club is one of them. I could go on and name a whole bunch of them, but they're now suing the federal government regarding the delisting, and so that's one piece. Tourism boycotts another. It's where we get to speak with our pocketbooks and with our votes. That's where we have power, and we need to harness that power.
Because as you know, and I'm an animal advocate for I don't know how long now, is that oftentimes the story happens, and then there's a big brouhaha, if you will. The story, we try to keep it out there, but at the end of the day, slap on the wrist. But in this case, it sounds like if we're talking about money and we're talking about them being the fourth Wyoming being the fourth state, right?
4.5 billion.
4.5 billion. So
Yep.
there's a difference between, and I'm not putting anything down here, brouhaha and 4.5 billion.
That's right. That's right. Money speaks. And the problem with that I don't like is innocent people will be harmed by that.
Mm,
However, the state needs to understand we're serious.
yeah.
And that's one of the ways to get them. People can go to Predator Defense. It's Brooks Fahey group, his group, and they have a petition. So if they go to, I think it's predatordefense.org, if
Mhm.
they go there, there's a petition to boycott. So
Okay.
that's the avenue they're going at.
Okay.
Center for Your Humane Economy is working on the end of the Sublette County charges towards for animal cruelty towards
Yeah.
Cody Roberts.
Hmm.
People need to remember this man got a $250 fine. It was business as usual. If this wouldn't have leaked and some good-hearted person had enough and leaked it, we would never,
We
we
wouldn't
would
be
still never
here.
know. No, not at all. It took one person. If you look at bystander behavior, there's a lot of different things that support bystanders. So and the bar patrons and the employees, they shunned any personal responsibility.
Should
Um,
those bar patrons and employees, since they saw it happening, should they be held accountable?
well, that's a good question. I'm certainly not an attorney. That's a good question if the county presses animal cruelty charges,
Mm,
right? But all the Fish and Game Department did was cite him for $250 for possession of a wild animal.
because
It
he
didn't
didn't kill
matter
it.
what
Sorry.
huh?
Because he
So
didn't
let's
kill it and he took it with him.
yes, and remember, it doesn't matter. They can kill a wolf in any way they want in that state.
Right.
So the awful torture that he did, unless Sublette County gets that, and I think that there's the PACT, P-A-C-T Act on a federal level, and I don't know, again, I'm not an attorney, I don't know what can be done at that end, but unless they press charges for animal cruelty, that's all Fish and Game could get them under. So they probably need to redo their laws, and that's another area of focus.
I have one more question for you. Um, as an animal advocate, because I am not pro hunting. I see an animal and I leave it alone.
Mhm.
Or it comes over and says hi and we, but as an animal advocate, when you heard this story, could you actually believe that, if we can put your 30 years away, I know that might be hard, but could you believe the story that you were hearing and different pieces started to come out and out and out with this story with Cody Roberts?
Well, that's an important piece to talk about because I think what has happened is that we have this traumatization that everybody's experiencing.
Mm,
And what happens is, and I can speak towards this too, I read about it, my heart got tight in my throat got tight. I had this visceral, what's called the somatic reaction. My
mm,
body became what's called sympathetic dominant. And when that happens, we release more norepinephrine or adrenaline. We release more cortisol to the brain. We get stressed, right?
mm.
And if we're empathic, compassionate people, which I believe most people are, we start to picture the image. We picture the image of this innocent wolf out in the woods where it lived with its pack being chased. We picture somebody running over it, and then we're more traumatized. We picture somebody taping its mouth closed, probably breaking its leg, taking it home. Apparently, from what I've read, he took it home and left it out to be tormented by the neighbor's dog. Well, he went in the house and took a nap and ate dinner and then took it to the bar. And so we picture those things. And then we have intrusive memories and flashbacks and thoughts that come up. And then we are interrupted in our sleep and we feel helpless and powerless. That's part of trauma. That's part of us having a very somatically visceral response to a really terrible thing. And I think that's what struck a chord with everybody, is we can't get it out of our minds. And this man has paid nothing really for what he did. And he's only one of more than one state who engages in this. And then you need to think about the psychopathy of people who do this kind of thing. I can't
Is
diagnose him, but we know in the research what kind of people do animal cruelty.
psychopathy, meaning you're talking about psychopath.
Yes, there's what's called, this is really interesting. It's called the dark triad. It was well researched started being researched in the 1960s. And
Hmm.
it's a combination of what's called Machiavellianism, which is sly, deceptive, distrusting, and manipulative
Hmm.
traits, narcissism, which is grandiosity, entitlement, dominance, and superiority, and then psychopathy or psychopathy, high impulsivity, thrill seeking, low empathy, and anxiety. And psychopathy is a robust indicator of animal abuse. And so, and the piece of that that's really important is the low callousness, unemotional, low empathy, right?
I heard this doctor in a story that the other day, and the gentleman who was seen on camera killing a dog, suffocating a dog, later told police he felt alive when he was doing it.
So
To me,
that's a really good point. They found in the studies of the people in this dark triad of the narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, they found that they had a higher incidence of negative attitudes towards animals. But the group that was most likely to act on animal cruelty was the psychopathy, that group. But if we attend to what you're saying, they've done another study where they looked at basically people with antisociality. And if we look at antisocial behavior, psychopathy or sociopathy, sociopaths and antisocial personality disorder, those are kind of roughly a synonym for each other. And then the more severe part of that is psychopathy, psychopaths. And so what they did is they looked at what lit up their brain. And we have what's called the nucleus accumbens, this area right here, right?
mhm,
And they looked at that area and then they stimulated it's the nucleus accumbens is the reward center, pleasure center of the brain.
mhm,
And dopamine is the reward neurotransmitter.
right.
So then they looked at what kinds of acts stimulates that for a psychopath, somebody who has high levels of antisociality. And they found that that psychopaths had released 4 times more dopamine to that part of the brain. So you think about somebody who's doing animal torture, like you're saying, they're getting sickeningly enough, a dopamine rush to the brain.
Hi.
That's right. We're sickened by it. We can't sleep. We have intrusive thoughts and memories, and they get a dopamine high. So Cody Roberts sees the wolf, revs up his snowmobile, goes after it, and it's worse when it's correlated, when it's coupled with substance use and alcohol use. And it
Right.
said Cody Roberts was drunk or had been drinking when he did this from reports. And so that person you're talking about who suffocated his dog, think about that. Think about I'm not referring, I don't know, I'm not
Right, right.
evaluating him, but think about the psychopathy that comes from the thrill of killing something and the dopamine release of it.
And then saying, I felt alive
Right.
as
Yeah.
he took the last few breaths
Of
of the.
something else. The dopamine rush. And think about then the callousness,
Hmm.
lack of empathy, lack of compassion. And that's what you have then. And sociopathy, according to Martha Stout, who wrote The Sociopath Next Door, sociopathy in our society, or antisocial personality disorder, is about 4%.
Hmm.
3 to 4%. And our local university has 12,000 students. That's over 400 sociopaths on one campus. That kind of quantifies it for you and makes it a little more real. So
Right.
then you think about the legislation that we've allowed in these states and the torture they're allowed to do to these animals and the ways they're allowed to kill them and the type of people who are drawn to that.
Can you still see me? I'm sorry.
I
Something.
can see you. Yeah.
Okay. Something popped up and I don't and I don't know how to get this. Hold on, doctor. I'm sorry. I'm 50. We didn't have this back in the day. Are you still with me?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Goodness, where am I? If I lose you, I apologize. No,
I'm still here.
I can't find myself. I apologize. Um, I can't find it. Okay, so I
Well, I
guess.
can see you, so you can continue to talk. And
Oh, okay, good. Okay, we have a few minutes. What about the fact? What about you add in the fact here that Cody Roberts is a pretty influential guy in the community? He essentially knows everybody, and he's got the big trucking company. He's got a big house. He's a player, if you
yeah,
will, a major player there. And for that gives him that, some would say that gives him a little bit more leeway, if you will, because of who he knows and what he does.
so if we look at that, in the age-old big man on campus kind of view,
Hmm.
that's who he is. And we give leniency. We make exceptions to people who have status in terms of their behavior. And
I'm
that's
good.
what we do.
Doctor, I want to thank you for joining me today. Really appreciate you giving us a behind the scenes look, if you will, of what can go on in here and what can happen if people stand up and see what a lot of people see as the right thing. So I'm
Well,
glad you
thank you.
joined us today.
I want to say one last thing that
Sure.
um, I talked about that sympathetic dominant response.
Yeah.
Where our nervous system becomes sympathetic dominant. And when we do that, we go into three things. We go into a freeze or a flight, which is where we shut down. People can't cope. I just can't deal with that. It's too painful. The
Right.
third one is a fight. And that's where we have to stay strong. We fight. We say no more. We stand strong. They're counting on us forgetting about this wolf and all the other wolves and coyotes and other species that we continue to harm just because they're out on the landscape. And we fight for their protections. That means next week, um, Lauren Boebert is going to be on the floor of the House trying to get wolves delisted across the country. I think it's her best science bill or something, which is ludicrous.
Right.
And we need to be speaking up, everybody, on behalf of their Congress people to fight that and not allow it to happen. And they
Right.
need to be emailing Deb Haaland and they need to be saying, what the heck with this delisting? Relist the wolf and protect them. And
Hmm.
then we need to be looking at the next elections because the people that we do have,
Right.
and we have to be picky because there will be an onslaught towards our wild species.
Well, and the other thing too is, I mean, I think you've heard from some of the from what was it? Um, have you seen some of the email responses from what was his name? He's a state senator talking about trans sex cult. He wishes there was more attention placed on trans sex culture in Florida, and then there was that the person should who's so concerned should get in touch with the European Union. I'm surprised I've seen these emails from a state senator in a time like this, but to me that says it goes back to the good old boy system. Sure, you can write your email. You know what? I'm going to respond to it too because you know what? Because I want to.
Mhm. And we need to be careful about subterfuges, things that people put out, smoke screens to get us off track. We got to stay on message. We want things to change.
That's the thing too, is that the message, there's a lot of stuff that's thrown out there, right? From my viewpoint, that doesn't relate. It's let's keep it straight down the line here. It's that Cody Roberts, right, tortured and killed the wolf, and period. It's the torturing that is for a lot of people, including the hunters who may want to change things in the future. It's the torturing that is the main point. And people, I keep seeing people do this. Stop going off topic. It's the point of torture, not just killing, but torture.
Well, to me, it's twofold. It's states that allow ruthless killing of apex carnivores, amazing species, because they treat them as their vermin.
Mhm.
And this, if you go back to the early history, that generational piece, wolves used to be revered on the landscape. They're spirit beings to indigenous tribes,
Mhm.
but we made them, we demonized them. The early settlers demonized them in order to take the land and make it into agriculture. People used to live harmoniously with wolves. There's nothing to be fearful about with wolves. But because we demonized them and we made them, stories like Little Red Riding Hood, this happened in Europe, in Japan, all over the place, all over the United States. And we still perpetuate that terrible myth that they don't belong. And,
Mm.
and we have to challenge that. Every species on this planet has its place. There's just an article that came out as this lovely study. 40 scientists across the country have already signed on to it about the research that's showing all the species that have sentience, consciousness. Even bees like to play. Bees like to roll down pieces of wood to play. Fruit flies dream. We're thinking as human beings that we are the most conscious species and we've got it all together when every other species works together in some more
I,
circular systemic way to sustain everything. We're the ones who don't. We need to
Doctor,
change that.
it's been a wonderful conversation, and I think your input is going to be a lot. It's going to be appreciated. It's already been, but it's going to be appreciated even more so when people hear you and see you straight up like this.
Well, thank you. It's been great to be here.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Uh-huh.